Okay, hopefully you're here for the right session. This is from pilots to pathways, career-connected learning that works. My name is John Garcia. I'm Executive Director of the Pathways Impact Fund. We work to expand career pathways experiences for young people at scale, hopefully connect them to meaningful job opportunities and lifelong learning. So yeah, I'm super excited to have this conversation with some esteemed partners and leaders here in this space. We're going to have a conversation kind of about what it takes to move from pilots to kind of scale and systems level work. We're going to talk a little bit about the Purposeful Pathways Commission report and how some of our work is connected to the themes in that report. But also really get into a conversation around how to overcome some of these barriers to scale and how to really connect these experiences that young people should be having in schools, taking it from small kind of programmatic efforts to large scale, just the future of what their experiences look like. So I'm super excited to jump in to this. I want to introduce my panelists though first. I'll have them introduce themselves so we can say a little bit about your name, your role, and how you're connected to this work. I will start with Melissa to my left.
Hi, y'all. Great to see some friends, familiar faces. My name is Melissa Connelly, and I co-chaired the Commission on Purposeful Pathways. My day oh, wow.
Yes.
Thank you.
Right.
My day job is CEO of OneGoal, so post-secondary access and success organization that we've been for the last 20 years working in schools, offering a credit-bearing elective that students can take where they prepare themselves for the rest of their lives. And then the other hat I will be wearing in this conversation, because I wear it every single day, is the one of a mother of an 18-year-old and a 16-year-old.
So Paul Herdman, I run Rodel, which is an education nonprofit based in Delaware. And I'm one of the co-chairs. There's only three of us. So it's a little bit strange language in terms of co-chair, but there are
Tri-chairs.
tri-chair or something. But there are 21 folks, including 4 youth commissioners, which were really a great asset to the group. So I too am a dad of 3 kids in their 20s, and so if anybody's a parent, I think one of the things that struck me about this commission was this is a crazy freaking world to be walking into as a young person right now. And so it just felt really timely as like an important time in this country, in this world. So that is a lens that we definitely bring to it. But I was also, actually my first educational job was here in San Francisco. I was a paraprofessional working with special needs kids, and I worked at the Exploratorium, which is now, I realize, on the Embarcadero. But I ran a high school and taught there and did some work for a couple of governors. But the work that I do now is as a regional intermediary. We're doing some work nationally as well, and I'll talk more about that. But what we say is convene, connect, and scale transformational change and education in the workforce. And the last lens that I would bring to this is that I've gotten a chance to do some international work looking at pathways, so that may come into this conversation.
Good afternoon. I'm Kimberly Smith. Is there still time to be a co-chair?
Might as well, Jojo.
Quad chair.
Quad chair? Okay. Today I'm a quad chair for the next hour. I co-lead the Center for Learner Pathway Innovations at Digital Promise. Digital Promise is a global education nonprofit, 15 years old. We work at the intersection of educators, technology, and researchers. And I have the pure pleasure of working with 200 districts across the country to think about pathways, to disrupt pathways, to create opportunities for students. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would just say that the Pathways Impact Fund is a newer effort. We're an organization that was put together through a set of funders who came together and really wanted to kind of scale pathways and fund intermediaries as a real cog to do that work. So in the report, this is mentioned. We'll kind of get into that a little bit, but I wanted to start the conversation hearing from you all, and so we have a Mentimeter, but I want to identify kind of where your heads are at with this, where some of the barriers that you've come across if you've been doing this work yourselves or been thinking about this work or engaged in this work, and kind of getting an understanding of like where you're currently at today as well in the work. So if you could go with your phone, take a photo of this, and we'll start with the first prompt. Just where's your work at today in building or supporting pathways? And you can answer that however you like, merging, pilot, scale, systems, whatever it may be. And there's a second question on there too, which is what is the biggest barrier you're facing right now? So I'll give you a few minutes to do that.
That's a different question. What are you hoping to take away from today's session?
Maybe the questions are flipped. We got to do that. We got to.
Aha. We fixed the question. Nope.
Voice it.
Get a couple.
Yeah, do
Okay.
All right, we can go old school and just have folks just share. Is it working now? Okay, all right, all right. All right, I'm gonna switch over and voice some of these so you know. All right, I'm just going to voice some of these over for our panelists who can't see the screen. So, yeah, folks are in different spaces. So, designing, thinking about regional scale, researching barriers to scaling integrated school models like PTEX, seeing solutions for student-employer engagement, focused on pathways for non-degree holders, facing lots of headwinds from employers, starting, waiting school approval, emerging, making it relevant, building a pilot for STEM students, building coalition policy discussions, piloting in local high schools. So, lots of folks seemingly all over the place with this, which is great because great to know where you're at, but also we can kind of talk to it from different perspectives as, you know, different folks have been in different places in this work as well too. So I would just say that a few things to kind of start the conversation. You know, we've built some significant momentum around things like career-connected learning, pathways, dual enrollment structures, credential attainment, internships, and things of the like. But at the same time, we know there's lots of shifts in the labor market, kind of AI emerging in this space, changing entry-level work, being impacted. Job pathways are kind of less linear now than they've had been in the past. Students are facing a lot of uncertainty right now, and our systems do take a while to catch up, right? They fundamentally haven't shifted necessarily to meet these demands. And so instead of asking kind of, you know, should we do these pathways, I think the question more that we're thinking about, I want to start with is, you know, why aren't these experiences delivering real kind of durable outcomes for all students? How have we kind of fell short in building these systems? And what's causing them to fall short? So we'll start with some of these barriers in mind. And I really want to start this from the student experience. So that being said, I'll kick this over to Melissa and Kim to start. With engagement way down, with students and AI reshaping entry-level work, career pathways becoming less predictable, as I mentioned. What are students feeling right now? And what are they actually navigating right now? Where are current pathways falling short of preparing them for what comes next? So I'll turn it over to you all.
So I try to keep myself honest by leveraging the voices of young people that reside in my home. And so as we were preparing for some of these panel conversations after we published the report, I actually pulled my son aside, who's a high school senior, and asked him exactly this question. What are you feeling? Where are we falling short? And, you know, he said, Mom, you know, you're my mom, so I get help, and I'm grateful for that. And ultimately, you know, I'm excited that I know where I'm going to go to school, go Mizzou, Tigers, and, you know, have some idea of what I'm going to do. But the reality is when I talk to most of my friends, they are stressed, lost, and incredibly fearful about what's ahead. He said, at the end of the day, even though I'm at a quote-unquote good public school, I was left largely on my own to figure this out. And I think that, as a sample of one, of course, I've got some other data to back up his perspective in a second. But it just resonated to me that that's largely what our kids are saying, is that they feel like they are mostly on their own in figuring out what their future looks like. There's a couple of reports that I've been paying a lot of attention to and really digging into because I think it really elevates this student voice. The Broken Marketplace report by Schultz Foundation, Walton funded Voices of Gen Z study. And there's a couple of specific stats that I think we should all be grounded in. So the Voices of Gen Z study found that over half of young adults are suffering or struggling after high school graduation. They used those specific words, suffering or struggling. Only 39% report a positive outlook for their future, 39%. Broken Marketplace report said that 59% of young people are concerned their career will be replaced by AI. 45% of young people describe the job marketplace and the support systems around them as broken. I also find it really compelling that in the Broken Marketplace report, they described a confidence gap, that adults have way more confidence in the future than young people. So 66% of parents still believe the American dream is possible for their kids. It's only 40% when you ask kids themselves. It is like literally, I have physical goosebumps. Because I think sometimes we throw out these stats and we all kind of know it, but like if you sit in it and feel it with our kids, like really feel it, our kids are scared about what's ahead and if they will have opportunity or the same opportunities that we have. I say a lot that I've been doing this work with OneGoal for the last 13 years. And a lot of it was like compelling and convincing folks that the work of preparing kids for their future, strong, high quality advising is important. I feel like lately it has felt like that recurring nightmare you have where you're like screaming at the top of your lungs, but no sound is coming out. Because what was already a really concerning situation for our young people, I think it could be a looming crisis if really the first two bars on the ladder for success are removed as we think about workforce displacement with entry-level jobs and the ways in which that could perpetuate inequity. And so, I don't want to fearmonger. I'm an optimist at my core. But if I were to try and represent the voice of our young people, I think there's a lot of fear.
Wow, thank you. I've been spending a lot of time with 20-somethings lately. I was having a conversation with one who, it was interesting, when I was in my 20s and I came out of college, I knew that if I wasn't going to land my perfect job, I'd have a fallback job. And I waited tables for a year. Anybody else waited tables after college, right? And that has been one of the things I'm hearing from young people. Like feeling like all options off the table, like there's not even a fallback option, which is very deep to think about, right? Another data point from the report that Melissa cites that I am just struck by is that over the past year, the excitement about AI for young folks has dropped by 18%. The anger has risen by 9%. That was the Walton Gallup study as well. So we try to talk about the opportunity of it, and there feels like they're hearing a narrative that's really disruptive mentally, emotionally, psychologically. And I think we all know a young person in the room who's really navigating this. So it's, one of the things I take hope from, and I see hope from in our Pathways work, is that when they start to see the application of AI in different contexts, there is some kind of opportunity there that I see. And we can talk more about that. But I don't want to leave on a kind of down note here. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's right, because why this is imperative is because, we'll see young people who are underemployed, unemployed, listless, feel disconnected. All these things can, happen from that. At the same time, there are lots of efforts taking place, right? We see momentum in career pathways taking place across the nation. Workforce is this hot buzzword right now everywhere, right? Everybody's thinking about it in some way or another. Advising, dual enrollment is growing, right? Like career connected learning is momentum. You see funders really stepping in here. But at the same time, a lot of those experiences aren't necessarily a coherent system, a coherent set of experiences. So Paul, can you maybe talk about some of the barriers in making this coherent for students?
Sure. And I'll be fairly quick because I know we want to shift towards solutions. But I would say two things. One is there's the golden rule, and the second is relationships. And the golden rule is in reference to the idea that whoever has the gold rules. And you have distinct...
Is that Aladdin?
Yeah. It's so you have these distinct systems that have different funding sources. So you have a K-12 system, and oftentimes it's even in a K-12 system, you may have funding from different agencies within a given state. So labor, education, health and human services, and then you have a K-12 or a high school system. Then you have a college system, and then you have the workforce, right? Each of those is funded in very different ways, and there's no malintent. It's just the way it's worked, that there are whole systems around compliance and people that are kind of driven around, all right, how did you spend that K-12 dollar? How did you spend the high school dollar, which is different, and what are the outcomes you're shooting for? And your higher ed institutions have multiple funding sources, right? If they're a state land grant institution or if they're a private institution. And then obviously the private sector is the private sector, right? So there's no inherent reason why these systems would connect. And there are inherent barriers to how that plays out. So that's the golden rule. The relationship piece, and this is something, and actually I see some folks who are we had a site visit last week to Delaware. One of the things that I've seen, which has been promising, is that the people that actually run those systems need to build relationships. So the people that run Department of Labor, education, it doesn't have to be the top secretaries. It has to be the people that actually do the work. If they actually talk to each other, that makes a huge difference. But they often don't. They're often in their silos, head down, and they are just trying to do their compliance thing, kind of get their things done. It's the rare one that sort of lifts their head up and says, I'm going to do beyond what I need to do to work with my colleague here to figure out how do we make this a little easier, more seamless, but it can be done, and I'll come back to that. But I would say those funding sources drive the incoherence, and then there's a lack of sort of relationship development, which again is driven by the way things are structured. And
I think that's all right, and also add that a lot of times these things live in silos, like programmatic, a set of experience, dual enrollment separate from advising for career navigation. You're getting some career connected learning, but you're not getting the opportunity to kind of reflect, process that experience, make pivots, figure out the next part of your journey, right? So, and those things often are categorical, and they're not aligned in a programmatic or a broader kind of approach for young people, right?
Right. And frankly, the nonprofits who are funded by discrete funders are often driven by certain outcomes that particular funder wants, right? So there's multiple reasons why these things end up being a bit fragmented.
Yeah. So speaking of fragmentation, you brought up the employer side.
Yeah.
So employers are a big part of this work and should be part of, I guess, the co-design, the co-construction, the co-value add to this work, right? Ultimately, you're trying to kind of align these educational experience, these credentials, these ways to make meaning of career connected learning, for example, into good jobs, jobs that pay well, jobs that actually are connected to what young people want to experience in the future and so forth. But that ends up being a barrier to kind of engaging those folks at scale often. So, Kim, maybe you can help us think about where does that kind of alignment kind of break down when it comes to employers kind of really being co-partners in this, especially at the school level?
Yeah, I want to give an example from this week. Chala Gupta, my colleague here, and I were in a conversation with an entity who has a tech platform working with a very large employer who we would all know. They are interested in bringing their training into K-12 to support students to earn certifications. Exciting, very exciting. They are reaching higher ed students right now very clearly and just want to get into K-12. And it's free. Doesn't that sound great? It's free, right? Remember the old adage in education, is it free as a beer or free as a puppy, right? And this, do I have to care for it? Do I have to feed it? Is it going to pee on the floor? Like all of that goes with the puppy. The challenge is, right, that there's from industry side of the equation, there should be an easy way to overlay or integrate what they're doing, because there's a clear ROI for the learner and for the labor market if this works. And it's free, and we're bringing the training right into the K-12 pipeline. I'm happy to see that, because there are a lot of industry folks that do not invest in the K-12 pipeline, and this industry entity does want to do that. But there's a huge gap in just simply understanding how the K-12 system works. I'm not going to put a plug for Digital Promise, but one of the things we do, you need translators. You absolutely need translators. You need brokers. You need people in the middle that help these entities understand how to work together, because it's the language, it's the way they work, it's the pace that they work. There's so many dimensions of this that are complicated that we have to kind of, almost like, it's like weaving these two together in a tapestry type of way. But it's, to the employer, it's like, well, why not? And the district, then lays out 35 reasons why not, and you've got to kind of solve for the biggest 5, essentially.
The one thing I would add, there was a moment, I don't know if you all remember this, when we were having a retreat for the commission, and we had a couple commissioners who represented different chambers of commerce. And at one point, we were talking about exactly this gap, like how do you bring employers to the table? What does that actually take to pull off? And one of the commissioners from a chamber of commerce said, I think the biggest problem is corporations don't know their employers. And I had this moment where I was like, I don't even, wait, what? What does that mean? And it was like, no, that it is a mindset for a corporation to start to think of themselves as an employer. And there's work, to your point of translation, that the Chamber of Commerce has to do to bring corporations around the table to help them understand that, to understand the role that they play in a community and the power that they could have around building talent pipelines that they don't always see themselves at, especially when the job market is what it is and they can open a position and have 800 applications overnight. They're not necessarily thinking about their responsibility as employers, which I thought was just, again, a real sort of awakening for me at why this translator role is so important.
Absolutely.
You can jump in, go ahead.
Yeah, just real quick, and this maybe bringing in, has anybody been to Switzerland? There's a bunch of folks who I know have been kind of looking at CMATs, which is like a training program from there. So in terms of this, like understanding yourself as an employer, Delaware, where I live, is a big finance banking hub, and we talked when we brought a little delegation over to Switzerland, and we talked to a bunch of bank CEOs, and we said, well, why is this important to you? And they first of all said, all of us on this panel were in apprenticeships. Like the CEOs of these banks were in apprenticeships at one point. And during the financial crisis, that was the one thing they didn't cut. And so if you look at the unemployment rate, youth unemployment rate in Switzerland, in 2007 versus 2010, in the United States, it went from like 8% to about 20%. And in Switzerland, it was 7% to 7%. It didn't move. And I talked with Ursula Renauld. Some of you may have come across her. She is one of the architects around the Swiss model. And I said, so in terms of employer engagement, what are some of the lessons learned around high-performing workforce systems? And she said 3 things, which I think kind of hits a little bit to the conversation we were just having. Number 1, she said, was make it easy. Make it frictionless as possible. So I think employers are saying, well, I have internship opportunities, but I don't know how to do it, or I don't know what to do with a high school kid. I've got these middle-aged guys who are, they don't know what to do with a high school kid. And so make it easy. And the second was the notion of ROI. They need to understand that there is a real return on investment. And they've done these 10-year studies, and this is an opportunity for the research folks in the room, folks that have longitudinal data systems. What they were able to do, and you can go to our website, or there's a paper that I wrote called Global Lessons that has some ROI studies in it, but they looked over 10 years, and basically what they found was that these employers were able to say, in the front end of this, when they were in high school, they were losing money. They were breaking things, they didn't know what they were doing. Midway, They actually knew what they were doing. They were actually somewhat low-cost employees. But then when they actually became employees, their retention rates were higher and the training costs were lower. And they stuck around. So it made a lot of sense for them. So there needs to be ROI, and we don't really have that. I think right now in the United States, it's mostly good corporate citizenship, and it's not really based in like, this is core to our business. And then the last thing, which I think some places are doing, I know we've done a little bit in Delaware, but I know other places as well, is the creation of industry councils. And so the idea of having, say, a healthcare industry, not the association which does more lobbying, but an industry council that could actually co-design standards so that across various, say in healthcare, in Delaware, for example, 1 out of 2 new jobs are in healthcare, that our various healthcare providers could have 80% consistency for what it means to be respiratory therapist or entry-level CNA, and that the companies could then train the remaining 20%. The reality is that they actually have industry councils across national lines. Like Germany and Switzerland actually have the same industry council standards. And I feel like that's a big opportunity in the United States to even do it at a state level, if not more at a national level.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, just some things that we've seen from intermediaries that are some of the best at translating, to this translation work, this coordinating, this making these things easy kind of work. One is like, all these applications are coming in with AI now, so it's AI trying to read AI, but you actually know who's going to probably be a good fit for your job if you're giving them internships and apprenticeships, and educators know about those young people and what they're capable of, right? That makes it easier for them. I think 2 is you want to not just have the corporate responsibility people, but the HR people making the case to the operation people. This is good for our bottom line as well too, right? So there's all these value. And also, it doesn't just require internships and apprenticeships. Those are very high level, they're good, but they could also be involved in career exploration, job shadowing, helping design project-based learning structures as well. So we've seen those as well too. Okay, so let's make a little bit of a pivot as we started moving into some solutions, right? And we'll talk about some of the systems work. So the challenge isn't about access. It's not about some of these other kinds of things, desire, demand from young people. So we want to talk about what it actually takes to build this work consistently at scale for young folks. How to move from a set of programs to a coherent experience for folks and in schools. So I think we're going to turn a little bit to the Pathways report here. The Commission on Purposeful Pathways, a launch pad for life, and that was an intentional name as high school, not the end point, but a launch pad into what's next, post-secondary kind of work opportunities. So I'm going to turn it over to Melissa and Paul. We're going to pull up a few slides here, and we'll kind of just work through this few slides talking about the framework and some of the recommendations in that and how that kind of connects to some of the bigger solutions we're going to talk about as well, too. Okay, so I'll just start here. This was a guiding kind of set of an idea for us as we thought about what is the end state, the end goal we're going to work to. And I think the thing we kind of landed on that culminated for all of us is by the end, we want young people to say this phrase: I know who I am, I know where I'm going, and I know who can help me get there, right? So if you remember nothing else about this report, this kind of mantra guided a lot of our work in thinking about our actual goal. So I'm going to turn it over to Melissa to talk about this Purposeful Pathways framework.
So it was really important when we got together, but we recognized there's probably nothing brand new that we're going to say that someone isn't already doing. There was sort of an element of humility that I think undergirded all that we did. We were very lucky enough to have Dr. Amy Lloyd on the commission, who had worked at the DOE in the Biden administration. And she literally had done work looking at every single state and where they were winning and where they weren't around purposeful pathways. And what she said very early on in this process really stuck with us. She said, there is not a single state in our country where they're not doing great work, right? Every single state has something that they are excelling at. The challenge is there's not one state that is excelling at all of it. And so that really pushed us to say, this isn't about saying something brand new that no one is considering. It's about weaving these bright spots and those big ideas together with the focus of integration and coherence. That's actually what came out of the report more than anything. And so what this framework highlights is that we identified 3 programmatic experiences that all young people deserve to have in a systematic way: accelerated coursework, career-connected learning, and high-quality advising. And again, the emphasis is on all kids, because there are lots of places where some kids get access to accelerated coursework. Some kids are doing really great workforce training programs. Some kids are getting advised. There were very few situations in any bright spot that we looked at where kids were systematically getting all 3, and that's where we believe the power is. The other element here that we know is incredibly important is the cultivation of agency throughout these programmatic experiences. And we had lots of conversations. When we think about cultivating agency, is that an input? Is it an output? Is it a separate programmatic experience? And what we recognized was yes, yes, and yes. That really, and this is really what binds this thread together. You can see it in this like orange, yellow, and blue, what brings everything together. Throughout all of these processes, do students have a sense of belonging, or do they have clarity and conviction about who they are and what they want to accomplish? And do they have the network around them that is going to help them do it?
Yeah, and I'll turn this over to Paul. So we have a set of recommendations that are kind of girded by that mantra, as I mentioned, by the framework, and thinking about how we can move forward in this space. Paul, if you want to voice over.
Sure. So in terms of the first recommendation, Melissa spoke to this a little bit. Could seem like a Pollyannish sort of framing of all students, right? It's sort of like a redux of No Child Left Behind, right? But it actually is probably the most important recommendation, because what we have is sort of a dual challenge in the United States and really globally around education and experience. So the education gap is that 85% of new jobs by 2031, according to Georgetown, are going to require some education beyond high school. It doesn't have to be college, it could be apprenticeship. But the experience gap is actually probably more prominent, which is that across 10 countries over 10 years, what they found is that young people have more education, but less experience, much less real-life experience than their older peers. And as a result, they're 3 to 4 times more likely to be unemployed. So that dual challenge of both needing extra experience and education put us in a situation where we said, we have a bifurcated system right now. So if you look at most high schools across the United States, about 20% of kids are in vocational schools, and about 80% are in comprehensive schools. In those comprehensive schools, you end up getting often more advising, and the advisors know little about apprenticeships or other things beyond college. And so if there are kids in the comprehensive system that want to explore those things, they're at a disadvantage. And then the kids in the vocational school often have really great co-ops and work-based learning experiences, but may not have as strong opportunities for dual enrollment in college or advising. So that all students was important to say, like, how do we build something that's coherent and provides those opportunities across the board? The second is around is that this hardwiring?
Yes.
Yeah. So this was one, the hardwiring around belonging, purpose, and social capital. Candidly, I think some of us were a little dubious about those because they're less grounded in the reality of what we do on a daily basis in many of our states. But what we found, particularly from our youth commissioners, was this is probably the most important greenfield for this field that we are all in to work on. And I'll share one anecdote real quick. There's a student named Lai who was a self-defined artivist, meaning she was an artist/activist. And she was in our group, and we were talking about enabling conditions, metrics, blah, blah, blah. And I could tell she was sort of death scrolling as we were talking. She was just sort of like, drifting away. And I was like, wait a second, Lai, like, how you doing? And she goes, I have no idea what you guys are talking about. And I said, so, like, let's pause for a second. Like, what's important for you about this conversation? And she said, I want to do something that I care about that helps my community. And I was just like, oh yeah, like you want a sense of purpose and you want a sense of belonging with your, so I was like, all right. So we have to kind of wrestle with that. And frankly, this is a real challenge for this community to really work on. The other is around moving the goalpost. I was a high school teacher and principal. We often thought about the idea that getting across the high school stage was important. The reality is U.S. Graduation standards have really ratcheted up over time. It's upwards of 90%. But if you follow those kids, it's a very leaky pipeline. So if you follow them to not only going to college, but actually finishing college, it's about 2 in 10 of those kids who originally started high school who actually complete college if you are sort of in the mean. But if you're a kid of color or low income, it's 1 in 10. And so the reality is that what most families and kids, and frankly your political leaders, are caring about is this experience you're doing in high school going to lead to a good job? And for governors, is it a good job in your state? And so moving this goalpost from high school graduation to economic mobility is something I think that sort of changes the game. And then the last kind of ties to that is that this is a shared responsibility. And this kind of gets back to the siloing that we talked about before. This doesn't happen if K-12, higher ed, and the workforce are not working together. And the only thing I would add to this, and this goes beyond the scope of the study, is that, frankly, we looked at 5 years, high school to the first year of college. My sense is that, and this is sort of a broader conversation, but that we're going to probably move from K to K-12, not just starting in high school, if we think about this career learning journey. And we're also going to be thinking about what happens through adulthood. But that's a broader conversation. But the reality is that, I don't know if folks know Matt Siegelman, but he was presenting last week, and he was talking about how we often thought about our job being working on the first 2 decades of a person's life in terms of training, but it's really the next 5 decades beyond that, because it's going to continually change. And so we have focused on that 5-year window, but it's a much bigger spectrum.
And I'll turn it over to Kim. What does this look like? How are you helping folks experiencing these things in high school?
I was actually going to ask all you a question.
Go ahead.
Mainly, well, I love the model, and I love where it landed, and I think about the weighting of those braids, particularly around social capital, and if that should be kind of a bigger braid than the other braids, because I think that most of us have had experiences where social capital has really helped us move forward. I was a journalism major. I don't know what I'm doing in this seat right now, but I would not be here without social capital. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that up because I think in the work that we're doing, we're trying to think about, we have this notion of unbounded pathways, that pathways are nonlinear. Most of us have had nonlinear pathways, and we want to put high school students into very rigid and linear pathways. So we think about acceleration. We think about how pathways are responsive, how they're co-created, how they're future forward, how they're credentialed. And trying to figure out how do you ensure that that student has not just access to the opportunities in the school, but that social capital piece is part of the equation. In the work that we do in rural regions, it's really interesting to think about the role that relationships and social capital plays in rural regions is significant, right? It is a significant advantage when we think about pathways. And watching that play out, families and the community in rural regions, is a huge factor. So I just want to kind of pump that up a little bit.
No, I think that's all right, on the right track. And I think like social capital, there's a lot of ways that we could think about even tapping into young people themselves in their own networks and helping them, find these kind of opportunities with some guidance, some support to do that, because there are some orgs that are helping kind of leverage young people's own social capital, even though there's like this idea that they don't have those networks. When you start kind of mapping it out and helping young people identify, they actually do have way more than folks think about. Like, I had a story of a young person who's like, I kind of want to go into like dentistry and orthodontist, but I don't know anybody, and the person saw they had a bunch of braces in their mouth, and it's like, yeah, you do know somebody, right? And they actually was to go job shadow their own dentist after that, right? So it's examples like that you got to design those into the system as well. And so yeah, that's great. That's great. Okay, so let's turn a little bit to some kind of systems level solutions in this space. Paul, what's the role that intermediaries play here? And can you talk a little bit about this from your own perspective? And thinking about kind of the level of coordination, as we mentioned, this last recommendation here, and kind of what it takes to do that work well.
Sure. So we serve as an intermediary, primarily in Delaware, but we're doing some work nationally. And what we say is we convene, connect, and scale transformational change in education and the workforce. And the example that plays out in this context is there was one pilot in one high school, 27 students, William Penn High School, where they were doing something different. They were giving kids what we know as pathways, but this was in 2014. They were getting meaningful work-based learning experience, up to 15 college credits, and national certifications that were portable. Today we have 30,000 students. About 75% of our high school kids, every high school in the state has got pathways. But what we did along the way was foundations and organizations that play these intermediary roles can bring the right people together. So we could bring the governor's office, we could bring the business community, et cetera, together, say, like, what are we going to do to figure this out? And part of that trip to Switzerland was to say, hey, who's the best in the world at this? And let's figure out what they're doing that we could learn from. We adapted that. But then it was a matter of working with philanthropy to try and bring in some additional resources. Then there was some federal dollars, and so we kind of built over time to be able to scale it. But there was some simple things that we did, and I don't know how far we want to get into solutions, but I would say there's just maybe a couple of them. One thing that was an easy thing to do out of the gate that frankly our Department of Ed did without any additional legislative change, which is while I said early on, like that golden rule that you can't really change where the funding is coming from, what you can do is change how you capture the metrics and the outcomes. And so what one of our colleagues did was he said, well, let's look at Department of Labor dollars, Department of Education dollars, Health and Human Services, and make it simple for the recipients, the districts and the charter schools, to have the same metrics across all those different funding sources. That gave them a ton of flexibility in terms of how they could use their dollars. And that didn't require any kind of statute. It just was an internal regulatory change. We've since moved to some other bigger systemic changes, like creating a cradle-to-career longitudinal data system so we can actually track these things over time, and working on governance. We actually worked with our new governor, Matt Meyer, to create a system where you're connecting the K-12 system, workforce, and higher ed in a new office of workforce development. And Ohio, Texas, and other places are doing something similar to that. But that connection is another way to begin to bring some coherence. I'd say the last thing that I would say is that places like Texas are doing a really good job of changing the incentives to move towards outcomes. So I think about the data, the funding, sort of coordination, and then sort of the incentives.
We're going to policy next on that for sure. But I think at the structural level, some things that we support too for intermediaries to do is like the best of the best are holding like a shared vision for the region. They're bringing together K-12 post-secondary workforce around kind of shared goals and holding folks accountable, and each other holding folks accountable. Also a set of like metrics around what does success look like in 5 years? How are we measuring that, right? What is our policy ecosystem? How is that supporting that? How are we using data, shared data, to kind of doing a continuous improvement in learning in this space? Those are all kind of important pieces of the work as well. So I would just say, those are all kind of important things that we see. Different intermediaries take different approaches to that, have different strengths, but all kind of doing those core functions. So Melissa and Kim, can you maybe talk a little about what these shared kind of partnerships look like on the ground for young people, how they might be experiencing this work when folks come together?
I'll offer a few. We're getting a 10-minute warning. Just
okay. Yeah.
So I'll be relatively quick. First of all, just a framework that has been very helpful for us at OneGoal, but also on the commission as we thought about what works, what is scalable. Stanford Innovation Research Journal 5 years ago came out with a framework that said the best solutions that scale because they are simple enough, big enough, cheap enough. Right? And that is like the test we should run everything through. Is it simple enough, big enough, cheap enough? So quick example on each. Simple enough. Dr. Laz Lopez, former superintendent, District 214 in Illinois, started as a high school principal, then became a soup. Basically just said, I started with 5 pathways. Simple. 5 pathways, 1 in healthcare, 1 in tech, right? And I just created very clear, structured experiences, accelerated coursework, conversations with employers. Now he has 72 There are 72 distinct pathways in this district that he can offer his young people, but he started with 5. Big enough. ECMC did research recently where they looked at students' confidence in their future, and less than 10% said that they were confident, but here's actually, I think, the more interesting part. The 10% that were more confident, there was a big difference between them and the 90% that were not. The 10% that were said that they had 5 or more conversations with an adult. The 90% said they had less than 5. It's a math problem, folks. How do we make sure every kid has 5 conversations with an adult? Right? That is big enough. That's the kind of size of advising we need to start thinking about. Every kid, 5 conversations. That's an algorithm we can structure and schedule. Make them 15-minute conversations. We can make that happen in a master schedule, I promise you. I think the cheap enough component is we have to start thinking about this as how do we leverage the existing assets we already have. So many schools have an advisory period or homeroom. So many schools, my daughter texts me every day from study hall. Every day. I'm like, what are you doing? Study, nothing, nothing. Whole lot of nothing. That is an asset. Time is an asset. How are we using our existing assets to get this done?
Kim, you want to weigh in?
I'm going to be really quick. So we do 3 things. 1, help make districts more agile in this work. Districts have to have agility. So we support them in bringing that agility in. Number 2 is the alliances, right? The ability for post-secondary higher ed to come together with school districts. Somebody has to help make that soup happen, and being able to do that in a way to support them. The last thing I want to name is the innovations that we can help spur. So in Alabama, there is a model that we call industry in residence. It is very unique because we have an industry person that rides along the entire way with the program and does the teacher PD. That's a very unique model, and also mentors the students. And it's just one person, but it makes all the difference in the world. And so bringing those innovations forward, because these folks are heads down at these school districts and in the higher ed, and we're trying to help them a little bit see like easy, quick things that they can do that'll help make the model smoother.
And while we have a few minutes, what are some policies that have been successful kind of helping spur this along? Or maybe these are like policies you'd like to see as well. We'll like turn this over to everybody.
Well, I could throw out a couple things. One is I was just in Tennessee last week, and the idea of these both comments of like simple and kind of getting stuff going and being innovative. Tennessee SCORE, some of you may be familiar with them. They have these innovation grants, which are basically seeding these little partnerships where you have to find an employer, a higher ed partner, K-12 partner, and they're coming up with interesting things. So I'm actually, and they have mentors from around the country. So I'm a volunteer mentor to one that is trying to create an AI credential in Eastern Tennessee. And it's a really interesting model where they've got a dozen of these really interesting pilots that are going to be scalable. So I think there's some innovation opportunities. I think sort of the systems work that I mentioned earlier is really important. I think sort of the data systems are critical to really doing that ROI work over time. And also continuous improvement. I mean, because I think one of the gaps that we've got is access. I think one of the things we haven't talked about too much here, but I know we've talked about offline, is that some folks are really concerned about is Pathways another version of tracking? Are the kids who are kids of color and disproportionately going to places where they're not going to be challenged as much? And I think part of what you can do with a good data system is begin to push on that. And I think so that data is critically important. The governance, I think, is again critically important. And then I think there's just sort of the last thing I would say is that there's this interesting opportunity with this green field that we've got around belonging, purpose, and social capital that I know some of us are working on actively right now to say this is really important, but we don't really know very much about how to measure it and how to do it at scale. So I'd say that's just an area to continue to grow.
Any others have?
Nothing to add.
Yeah, no, I would just say like some ways to kind of incentivize, especially at the student level, being able to kind of measure how many young people are receiving all these experiences in a coherent way at quality, right? So we have a lot of statewide public data pieces around accountability and ESSA and so forth too. We don't really have a lot of incentive structures say like all three of these things are equally important. Every school needs to track it. We need to know which students are getting all of them. Right, that would be, I think, a policy win to try to kind of incentivize that, and outcomes-based funding structures that are out there, like in Texas and others. I think Tennessee, Florida have versions of it. But if they can incentivize more of this career-connected learning, more of these purpose-building social capital pieces, that'd be great, right? In different ways. So those are just some big takeaways. Okay, so I think we have a closing Mentimeter for folks. Unless anybody has any final words, anything you want to add as far as recommendations, bright spots. Okay. Let's hear from the audience. Okay. So this was the one that was that came up before. Okay. Oh yeah. Questions for the panel or any kinds of. You can also put any insights, ideas here, things you want to lift up for us too. But we could take some live too if you have any questions here. But we'll give you a few minutes as well.
Yeah. Open any questions.
Burning?
Just curious, I know we talk a lot about advising, right, and the importance of it. Just curious, have you saw a model that you like, wow, this is working? I say y'all. Just curious to hear more about it.
Don't make me speak about it. You pointed at me.
OneGoal, that's what
You got OneGoal here.
that's their
Yeah.
whole jam. So
Yeah.
I think
It is our whole jam, but I will speak about it in a way that I think is just like what we've learned. My predecessor who founded OneGoal, I used to kick him under the table every time he'd be like, OneGoal is a course designed, and I'm like, stop it, it's not a course. Like, we have democratized advising. We have said this isn't something that should be relegated to a counselor's office in the back room. Counselors are saints. Their job's impossible. They have way too much on their plates. How do we democratize this? And so our model is to train educators who are already having conversations with young people about their future all the time, but actually train them, provide curriculum, provide good data, good tools so that they can do it in a structured environment, and not just because a teacher comes to them or a kid comes to them after school and says, hey, I don't know what I'm doing next year. Because that's where advising is really taking place, but we work to systematize that. And so I truly believe the number one reason why OneGoal works is because we have taken where there are already existing assets and existing relationships and said this is actually where advising could happen. And leveraging the counselors and counselor departments as they should be, as people who are setting vision and direction, people who are bringing employers to the table, who are crafting those pathways that then advise, that then empower the navigators. And so I think that has to be part of the solution.
I can give two examples too, just that we've seen nationally. One is Learn to Earn Dayton has like a career navigator kind of structure that they're kind of supplementing, supporting schools. They have a statewide appropriation to support that. Now they're doing kind of a train the trainer and helping people kind of use those career advisors to implement the PACE framework, which is a career navigation framework. Another one is Elevate Ed AZ in Arizona. They have another kind of career navigator structure that runs through the chamber. So they're very tied to kind of the career connected kind of piece of this. So they orient a lot of their advising around actual jobs that the employers want and the kind of skills. So those are two examples. I don't know. I know you guys are doing a lot of advising as well too.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, I know we're getting near time here, but one thing that we did, this is kind of a simple thing, not as complex as the work that Melissa does, but we helped organize what's called College Access Month, for years. It was just it was a huge opportunity for employers, AmeriCorps recipients to get in and working with high schools to help them fill out FAFSA forms, et cetera, in the fall. But we changed that in the last couple of years to Launch Month. And we've created a system where they can actually, that the volunteers can access information about how do you access apprenticeships and other opportunities, military, et cetera. So it's not just college. And that's a simple thing, but it's like we get several hundred employers who are involved in that. And it's a very simple way to kind of just engage a broad set of folks and democratize sort of the experience.
Okay, well, I think we are.
If you want to address
Oh, some questions on here? I can't really see any, but maybe take one or two. For $100 million, where would you put it to make this happen nationally? That's a good one, right? Yeah, I think money's helpful, like especially if you use the money in the right way to incentivize the right types of thing, but it does also take shared accountability, a shared vision. Some of the best regions and states have like an overarching framework, a vision, a set of goals that they're all moving around, but I don't know if anybody else had any ideas or $100 million, how you'd spend that.
I mean, from my perspective, and I think, you know, the Pathways Impact Fund is a good start, I mentioned Switzerland a couple times, and a lot of people have gone to visit. I don't think we have a consistent definition of what pathways look like in America. And if we could help 10 states actually get to a place of systematized pathways, and it could look different in state to state, but really have these healthy ways to implement these recommendations across 10 states, I think we could really change the conversation.
And I'd be funding intermediaries to be helping with that,
Yeah.
and some partners, their partners along the way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think we're at time. Would you help me and kind of give a hand to our esteemed panelists here? Thank you all so much. Really appreciate being part of the conversation with us.